It's a beautiful night for Friday Night Lights. The FAC is competitive as ever, and either Washington or Chillicothe will emerge as a title contender. Plus, two LCL teams are battling for the conference crown, bragging rights, and a little more. And in our game of the week, the MSL is on the line. Logan Elm versus Bloom-Carroll.
Let's get comfy. Gridiron Glory starts right now.
Man, oh man, these conferences are wild. Things just keep getting shaken up because anything can happen on any given Friday. Welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, Jake Amata. Thanks for tuning in. Joining me, as always, are our wonderful senior reporters, Jack Demler and Chloe G. Workman.
Jacob, playoffs are on the horizon, and teams are battling for those final spots, and we're excited to break down the clinching scenarios across 5 southeastern Ohio regions.
That's right, Jack, and a special thanks to Fantastic50.net for the playoff projections you're going to see all night on the show.
Chloe, Jack, can't wait to hear what you have in store, but until then, we've got 5 Showtime games tonight, and as we go down the list, we'll chime in with playoff scenarios for every team, plus a whopping 6 games covered on our digital platforms, so follow along online and stick around for a sneak peek. But we start tonight in the FAC. It's a clear 3-horse race for the title, and we've got our first taste of the action tonight. Zach Mothersbaugh made the trip to Herrnstein Field.
Mata, we have an FAC gauntlet where Jackson, Washington Courthouse, and Chillicothe play each other to determine the title winner. And today, the first of those 3 games starts with the Blue Lions and the Cavaliers. Both of these teams come in at the top of the FAC undefeated in conference play, and they bring in 2 elite tight ends who are mismatches no matter who the defense puts on them. Tanner LeMaster and Tavion Galloway are both 6'5" or taller and can high point the football over just about anyone.
And Galloway doesn't just get it done on offense.
That's right. He's a top-notch linebacker, and his height and athleticism make him a daunting presence in the middle of the field. But as the teams take the field before this showdown, it was the defenses that shined early. It was punt after punt to start this game, and the defenses seemed to have everything sniffed out. But after a forced fumble, Tanner LeMaster reels in a perfect back corner fade to open up the scoring. Then the Blue Lion defense flashed again as Mason Kaufman got an easy interception to set Washington up at the Chillicothe 30, and it went right back to LeMaster. This time, Troy Thompson set him up in the middle of the end zone to haul in his second of the night. After a Washington Courthouse field goal, the Cavaliers looked like they were starting to get things going with big plays down the field, but they were stopped on 4th down inside the 5, and that 17-0 score would hold until the end of the first half. Chillicothe in the second half would go on to put up some points, but in the end, Washington would take this one 24-14.
Well, Zach, it doesn't look like we got the offensive explosiveness that we were expecting.
No, Amato, we didn't. There were a lot of stars in this game. AJ Dahlmeyer, Tanner LeMaster, Tavion Galloway, the quarterbacks for both teams. We expected big plays, and we just didn't get them. They started off this game with 6 straight punts, and then both the touchdowns that were scored in the first half were scored off of turnovers. There was a pick and a fumble that set Washington Courthouse up in good position to get that score.
Now, were these 2-star tight ends able to get it working on the defensive game?
Well, I would say LeMaster a little bit. He did have those 2 first-half touchdowns, but like I said, they were both off of turnovers. They couldn't drive the ball down the field. Tavion Galloway had that one big catch that you saw a little bit earlier, but that ended up in a 4th down stop by the Washington Courthouse defense. Galloway did a little bit on defense, but other than that, not too much.
Now, what do you think? Did Washington Courthouse show enough to take the FAC title?
Well, I just mentioned that slow start, and man, when you play Jackson, you cannot start slow. They got Jacob Winters, they got Cade Wolford. It's very difficult to stop those two in any part of the game, especially in the beginning, and they're going to have to keep up like that. And moving forward into the conference standings, Washington Courthouse just played Chillicothe and took the dub. But Jackson is coming up in Courthouse's schedule, and with Miami Trace getting it done this week against Hillsborough, they are the only other team in the conference with a conference victory.
Now, Zach, thanks for the insight, but let's talk playoffs. Both Washington Courthouse and Chillicothe have clinched spots in their division, but Jack and Chloe, what's the rest of the field look like?
Jacob, so far 11 teams have clinched a playoff spot in Region 11, 8 of which have come out of the 7-4-0, 3 of which have come out of the FAC. That leaves 5 spots still up for grabs.
Yeah, Jack, and the FAC has a chance of seeing a 4th team make it, Miami Trace. After their win against Hillsborough tonight, the Panthers increased their playoff chances to 71%. They need to beat either Courthouse or McLean in the final weeks to keep their chances above 80%. Beating both teams would guarantee the Panthers a spot. Now, in the MSL, Circleville lost to Hamilton Township tonight, putting their chances at just 9%. Even if they win out, their odds max out at 47%, so they'll need to root against other teams in their division, particularly Whitehall Yearling. John Glenn has made the postseason 5 years in a row, but now they're sitting at just 13% chance. Winning out gets them the 99%, but they'll have to beat the NVL favorites, Tri-Valley.
And Chloe, the last team to come out of the 7-4-0 fighting for a playoff spot is Zanesville. And after losing to Granville, the Blue Devils sit with only a 37% chance of making the playoffs. Winning out gets them to clinch. That's all we got for now. Jacob?
Thanks, guys. Let's move on to the LCL, where 2 schools of the city of Pataskala are fighting for Division II Region 7 playoff positioning in this year's edition of Battle for Broad. We welcome LCL reporter Cade Williamson to run us through this matchup.
Yeah, thanks, Mata. This game is one of the biggest rivalries in all of Licking County. Pataskala. In 2006, the Pataskala Rotary Club created the Battle for Broad Street event to renew the rivalry between these crosstown teams. To honor the rivalry, each year, the winning team gets a street sign behind City Hall named in their favor, either Warrior Way or Hornet Way. The return of the LCL in 2013 marked the first time these 2 teams matched up in conference for this event. And this year, the rivalry goes even deeper as both head coaches have deep ties to not only the town, but one another. Darren Waters was the former head coach of Heights for 15 seasons, where current Hornets head coach Kellen Wanlund was an assistant under him.
He coached me when I was in high school, and I had the opportunity to be his head coach when he was in high school. We spent 16 years together at Licking Heights. Really proud of everything that he's doing over there, and super excited for this game tonight.
Coach Waters wasn't the only one excited about this rivalry, as the whole city of Pataskala seemed to be in the house tonight. I mean, look at that. We got a flyover for this matchup, which wasn't the only thing that was high-flying to start this ball game, I'll say. Licking Heights stuck to the ground game with quarterback Deuce Caldwell and seemed to have the upper hand early on. However, penalties were the name of the game, as both teams struggled with them early in this ball game. That forced the offenses into tough situations where they had to go on 4th downs, but instead, Licking Heights ended up punching it in. After a Jake Lepinto 20-yard touchdown run and dive, Licking Heights took the lead. A couple drives later, Jace Henry blocked a punt to give Watkins good field position, where Jude Wise knocked one through the upright, making the score 73 into half. However, the halftime lead wasn't enough for the Hornets, as Watkins Memorial was the one chalking up the deuces tonight and switching the street sign over to black and gold Warrior Way.
Now, Cade, this one seems like a barn burner. What does this mean for the LCL moving forward?
Well, the LCL moving forward is a tough conference in all of the 7-4-0. After this game, Watkins Memorial controls their own destiny for an LCL Buckeye title. With the win tonight, the Warriors have to win their next 2 matchups. Next week, they have an easy opponent in Zanesville, but the real test comes in Week 10 against Granville. If Watkins wants the uncontested title, they'll have to beat the Blue Aces for the first time since 2015, and what should be an equally tough matchup.
Yeah, Cade, the anticipation will have the entire LCL on their feet, but you gotta wonder how Licking Heights will rebound from this loss.
Well, Mata, Licking Heights has already rebounded from 2 early season losses against Bell Fountain and Tri-Valley, and guys like sophomore Reese Powell will help. But this time, it will be much more difficult. They face one of the best teams in Division 5 and undefeated Harvest Prep next week. A win against Harvest Prep would not only keep the Hornets swarm buzzing around the LCL title race with momentum heading into Week 10's matchup against Licking Valley, but it would also propel Licking Heights into a solid seeding in Division 2 Region 7. Although the Hornets might have a solid seeding in the region, there are some tough opponents ahead that might have to face after round 1 of the playoffs, Mata.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough one. We'll just have to wait and see, because that Harvest Prep team is a grim reaper in Region 19. Jack and Chloe, what other Southeast Ohio teams might meet the Warriors in the postseason?
Jacob, Harvest Prep is one of the 2 teams to beat in the region, the other being our very own Ironton Tigers. 12 total spots have been claimed in this region after wins for West Muskingum, Portsmouth, and Northwest tonight, including 9 teams from the 740. Now that means 5 spots are still open and plenty of teams still fighting for those spots.
Yeah, Chloe, Minford's got a 91% chance to fill one of those spots. They need to beat Waverly next week to clinch or win in week 10 to keep their odds at 96%. Now over in the SVC, Piketon makes a big jump tonight up to 82%, but they need to win out to guarantee themselves a spot. If they lose to Huntington next week, their odds fall to 42%, and they need to root against Liberty Union to see the Lions fall out of the ranks. The Lions fall themselves in a dreadful situation after losing tonight. Winning out only gives Liberty Union a 50-50 shot. They will need Huntington to beat Piketon to improve their chances. And Chloe, we've got a potential play-in game at stake in the TVC Ohio. Meg's odds up to 64% and Alexander up to 42% after tonight. Both teams need to win out for a spot, and they play each other in Week 10, so that'll be a game to watch for in Region 19.
And Jack, we can't forget about the OVC. I mean, South Point's odds are up to 28%. The only way they can guarantee themselves a spot is if they upset Gallia Academy. Otherwise, beating Portsmouth next week gives them 93% odds, but the Trojans are hot right now. That's all for now. Back to you, Mata.
That Union local team is made up of rising stars in the OVAC, where we saw 2 great games tonight. The Jets took on St. Clairsville in a game that could shake up the Buckeye 8, and River battled Shenandoah to see who gets a shot at Barnesville for a potential share of the MOVL title. For that, we welcome the OVAC duo Grayson Wolf and Peyton Brooker.
That's right, Jacob. We saw 2 huge games that came down right to the wire, with one coming down right to the wire.
It was a great night in the OVAC, and we started the hangar with St. C and Union Local. Union Local headed into last week at 6-0 and left at 5-2. The OHSAA deemed their Week 1 win against the Columbus Crusaders a loss after it was discovered the Jets used an ineligible player. They then lost in an upset to Cambridge last Friday to lose their first conference game. St. Clairsville is 5-2 as well and undefeated in conference. With a win, they would clinch at least a share of their 6th straight Buckeye 8 South Division title. Now let's get into the highlights. The Jets take off out of their inflatable helmet ready for battle. The only problem, both offenses were left on the runway. We saw just 1 touchdown in the first half. This Carter Blake 2-yard score would put the Jets ahead 6-0. Now in the second half, on the Red Devils' first drive of the third quarter, Andrew Vera finds Cole Thorborn for the touchdown. After a missed PAT, we're tied. On the next Red Devil possession and the last play of the third quarter, it's their main man, Jacob Walker, who takes in the score to give them the lead. The Jets would not go quietly, though. They put a drive of their own together, and it is capped off by another Blake rushing touchdown. After an extra point, the Jets are up 13-12. St. Clairsville now with the ball, and they take down the clock all the way to 24 seconds left in the game. Vera calls his own number and falls into the end zone. The Red Devils are victorious 20-13 and clinch at least a share of a conference title. These young Red Devils remain atop the Buckeye 8. And Peyton, over in the MOVL, 2 teams similarly battle for conference supremacy.
Here, Grayson, there's a battle between 2 star quarterbacks in the MOVL tonight. These 2 quarterbacks have carried their teams to success so far. For the Zeps, freshman star Braxton Barnett has put Shenandoah in the MOVL title race, as he threw for 3 touchdowns and only 8 attempts last week. Meanwhile, junior Caleb Eisel and the Pilots have shake up the standings, but when the night River moves into second place and stays alive for a title share. On the first drive for the Pilots, quarterback Caleb Eisel runs for some decent gain from the red zone and eventually scores on a QB sneak a few plays later. On the Zeps' first drive, Braxton pass is suddenly intercepted by Ty Long and takes it all the way to the 1-yard line. Later scored by Eisel a second time, 13-0 Pilots. The scoring frenzy for the Pilots is on, then continued on their next drive as Cable Eisel finds Brody Laughlin for a 26-yard touchdown, making it 3 touchdowns unanswered. Shenandoah would find some improvements though in the second quarter with 2 touchdowns of their own, including this 10-yard touchdown from Braxton Barnett. But after the touchdown, the Pilots would just keep responding as Caleb would find Brody again off a screen and completely run over a defender. This explosive offense ran through the Shenandoah's defense here tonight, as the Pilots will win this matchup 47-22.
All right, guys, tell me where these 4 teams stand in conference play and playoff seeding.
Jacob, I would be delighted. Let's start with the 2 teams I saw tonight. With the win, the Red Devils have clinched just a share of the title. To win the title outright, they will have to beat Cambridge on the road in Week 10. As for their playoff seeding, if they win out, they will be awarded the 1 seed in Region 15. With a loss in either Week 9 or 10, they will have the 2 seed. As for the Jets, now that they're out of contention for a Buckeye 8 title, it is all eyes on the playoffs. They have already clinched home field for Week 11, even if they lose out. If they win out, they can move all the way up to a 3 seed.
For the River Pilots, Grayson, although they're celebrating tonight, they unfortunately have to root for the Zeps next week. Because they're the last hope for the Pilots to share the MOBL title, is for Shenandoah to beat the Barnesville Shamrocks. This would be a huge upset because River has lost to the Shamrocks earlier this season. As for the Zeps, their game next week against the Barnesville Shamrocks will determine the fate of the MOBL. If Shenandoah wins, they could have a three-way share of the title. As for the playoffs, the Zeps will need to win one of their last two games, otherwise be on the road as round one of the playoffs.
Now let's take a look at those standings. Barnesville beat Monroe Central tonight to clinch at least a share of the title. And after tonight, River finishes the year at 3-1 in conference. Shenandoah just needs to knock off the Shamrocks for a three-way title share. As for the Buckeye 8, St. Clairsville is looking down at the rest of the field, while Union Local falls all the way to the bottom alongside Martins Ferry. Cambridge just awaiting that St. C matchup in Week 10, while Bel Air sits in third and plays tomorrow.
Grayson, it looks like the conference title race is clearing up.
100% Peyton, but we don't have as much clarity with the playoff race. For that, we send it back to Jack and Chloe in studio.
Thanks, guys. Get home safe. And Chloe, Shenandoah is one of those teams that have already clinched a spot in the Region 23 playoffs. So far, we've seen 13 total teams clinch a playoff berth, including Rock Hill, which had a shocking upset tonight over Gallia Academy.
Yeah, and 3 spots remain in this region, and 2 Southeast Ohio teams are still in the running. For Martins Ferry, after a loss to Willing Central Catholic, the Purple Riders fall to a 4% chance of making the playoffs, but they need to win out in order to get their chances up to 82%. However, that includes a win against Bel Air, and a loss will effectively eliminate them from the postseason.
Yeah, and Trimble currently has a 25% chance of making the playoffs. If the Tomcats can win out, they increase their chances to 99%, but that requires a win over Waterford, which could make or break the chances for a team that has made it 12 straight years.
The 7-4-0 teams in this region have it on lock. And guys, before we move on to our game of the week, you know we've got a packed slate of digital games tonight.
Oh, and Mata, you know we'd be happy to break it down.
First things first, these 2 TVC teams are used to seeing success, but both came in tonight winless. It's been a rough year for Wellston and Athens up to this point, and just 3 years ago, these teams shared the TVC title. Both teams are looking for their first elusive win. Tonight, Athens quarterback Braden Young was on fire, totaling 6 touchdowns, including 4 through the air and 2 on the ground. And it took until Week 8, but the Bulldogs finally have their first win in a dominant fashion, 46-0. But as for the title race, Nelsonville, York, and Vinton County still remain atop the TVC Ohio after they both picked up dubs tonight over Alexander and River Valley. The Spartans' loss knocks them out of contention, which means NY and VC face off next week for the conference crown.
Moving on to Paint Valley and Unioto. Paint Valley was looking to stay undefeated in conference so they can challenge Zane Trace for the SVC title next week. But Unioto put it to them and showed they are not out of the fight. The game was close through the first half, but Unioto began to pull away with a touchdown from Ryan Griffin. They kept their foot on the gas the rest of the night. Unioto and Paint Valley trailed close behind the undefeated Zane Trace Pioneers, but if the Bearcats upset Zane Trace next week, we'd have a 3-way title split. Plus, Huntington's win over Westfall tonight secures the Huntsmen their first playoff appearance in school history.
Portsmouth has come out of nowhere recently after taking down Colgrove, and it's easy to get hot when quarterback Tyler Duncan can pass for over 1,700 yards on the year. Tonight, the Trojans flex their offense behind that Duncan duo. With that win, they have officially clinched a playoff berth, and now they still have a chance at the OVC title if there are any upsets for the rest of the season. Now, if the Trojans want that title, they have to beat the undefeated Ironton Tigers in Week 10, but all eyes are on next week for Ironton when they take on Gallia Academy, who did suffer a tough loss tonight to Rock Hill. Colgrove and Fairland have proven to be highly competitive, but both have 3 losses in this brutal OVC.
And now the history between Maysville and Sheridan runs deep, but the Generals are dominating the Panthers. They're 19-2 since 2000, and the Generals did not look back, exploding to a 30-7 lead in the first half and outscoring Maysville in the second half 24-0. Sheridan extends their series to 20-2 since 2000 with a 50-13 victory, and now they are set up for the NBL title next week. And with the win, Sheridan, as I mentioned, is set up for the NBA title rematch next week against Tri-Valley Panthers. Both are undefeated in conference play, but Sheridan is looking for revenge after last year's loss. The rest of the NBL teams seem to be struggling with those 2 powerhouses at the top.
Now, in the SOC, it's Waverly's biggest rivalry as they welcome the Wheelersburg Pirates. In the last 15 years, the Pirates have owned the rivalry 14-1, and they continued that pattern of domination tonight on the shoulders of their running back, Creed Warren. Warren finished the night with 106 rushing yards and found the end zone 3 times. The Pirates have now won 15 of the last 16 meetings, beating the Tigers 49-14. But that sets the stage for the SOC2 title. Portsmouth West and Wheelersburg are both undefeated through conference play. And after the blowout for the Pirates this week, the Senators might have some work to do because they played Waverly close.
And finally, Green versus Northwest. This was set up to be the SOC1 title game before Green suffered their first loss last week against Notre Dame. Northwest running back Wyatt Brackman was an unstoppable force of nature tonight. He totaled 234 rushing yards and found the end zone 3 times. Northwest in the driver's seat tonight, and they make matters worse for Green, winning 28-19. And the Bobcats fall to 6-2 after a historic 6-0 start. And now Northwest has the clear path to a conference crown. All they need to do is beat Eastern next week. Although the Eagles started the year 0-5, they've managed to pick up 2 conference wins since then. But man, what an unforgettable fate for the Green and the Bobcat faithful.
Yeah, Jack, but they have clinched themselves a spot in the Region 27. They're just one of the 9 teams who have qualified in Region 27, but all but one comes from the 7-4-0. There are 7 spots left for those teams.
Yeah, and the MSL Cardinal has 2 teams looking to claim their spot in the postseason. The Miller Falcons need to beat Fisher Catholic tomorrow night in order to increase their chances of making the playoffs to 99%. The Falcons' next win officially guarantees them a spot. The other MSL Cardinal team looking for a spot is Fairfield Christian Academy. They match up with Bishop Rosecrans tomorrow, and if they can win, they clinch. A loss next week requires the Knights need to win out to clinch a playoff spot. And another team in the hunt that plays tomorrow is Shadyside. The Tigers have a daunting task in front of them as they take on Bel Air. If Shadyside loses, they will need to beat Bridgeport to raise their chances to 94%. And after losing to Waterford, Southern falls to 98% chance of making the playoffs. They need to just win 1 more to clinch, whether it's against Eastern or South Gallia.
And Jack, after Sims Valley lost tonight, they now sit at a 58% chance of making the playoffs, but they need to beat either Notre Dame or Northwest to clinch a spot. Only 1 more region to go tonight, but for now, we're going to send this one back to Jacob and Maria for our game of the week.
Guys, the fight for the playoffs is heating up, but for these 2 MSL teams, all eyes are on the conference title. Tonight, Bloom-Carroll is defending their home crown and their home turf against Logan Elm. MSL reporter Maria Manessi joins us now to break down this game of the week.
Mata, the last time that Logan Elm beat Bloom-Carroll was back in 2015. It's also the last time that the Braves had a 6-win season. The 6-1 start this year is a major turnaround as the Braves finished 3-7 just a year ago and second to last in the MSL. But now they are competing against Bloom-Carroll in what's likely the title game. For Bulldog fans, it's no surprise to see their team back at the top of the MSL competing for their 5th straight conference title. Both of these teams are off to great starts to their season, with their only losses being in the season opener to undefeated teams.
The Braves have the talent to win this game, but playing at Carl Fell Stadium isn't easy.
It's a tough environment to travel to, and the home fans always show out for their Bulldogs.
And we got to see it firsthand tonight.
We've been told we have the best concessions in the area compared to the other teams in our league, I guess you would say.
It's cold. I saw him out there.
We provide the athletes with uniforms and equipment, and we've been fortunate enough to have successful enough concessions that we were actually able to build this building, pay for this building ourselves. I thrive on this. I kind of like the hectic part of it. This was a way for me personally to stay in contact with the community, even though I'm not from here, but because I have the time and I have the energy and I have the inclination, and I enjoy doing it.
More live action. Live action. You ready?
Yeah. There you go.
So how do you feel about Logan Elm football? Fair enough. Thank you.
Maria, it looked like home field advantage was going to play a huge role in this one.
Yeah, fans were going nuts all night and it showed, but that's no surprise. The dog pound was rowdy as the Bulldogs prepared to fight for the top spot in the conference against Logan Elm. Aaron Walters wasted no time as he connects with his man Landon Thompson for a 31-yard score. It's 7-0 Braves. Ethan Thanthanabong says, no problem, let me show you what I can do, as he throws it right to Broden Bishop in the end zone for the 24-yard score. It's 7-7. Dylan Armentrout later fumbles the ball, and it is recovered by the Braves, who take over at their own 35-yard line. With just over a minute and a half, Aaron Walters finds Braylon Baker, who takes it past the goal line. A block extra point makes it 13-7. Armentrout was back doing what he does best with a 40-yard run down the field. He then capitalized the run with this 25-yard touchdown catch, which he took straight to the house. The defense held the Braves to just one TD in the second half, and it was the high-powered offense that had the Bulldogs coming out on top with a 41-20 victory. Model, we knew this was going to be a battle of two lockdown defenses, and a big part of this game was decided by how each team contained their opponent's star running backs. The Bulldogs defense locked in and held Blayton Reed to just 12 rushing yards on the night. Bloom-Carroll being able to contain an offensive leader like Reed was huge for this team.
On the flip side, Maria, it seemed that the Bloom-Carroll running backs had no problem against the Brave defense. How'd they do tonight?
You got that right. The Bulldogs had 324 total rushing yards on the night. They were led by Dylan Armentrout and Chase Plants, which are huge leaders for the Bulldogs and will play key roles in helping them as they look to go far.
Both teams have clinched spots in the playoffs, but what are these teams looking forward to in the postseason?
The Bulldogs have 2 straight semifinals appearances. They look to go deep and make it a three-peat. If both teams can win out, they're expected to finish in the top 8 and get a home game in round 1. Bloom-Carroll may even finish in the top 4 of Region 11 and get 2 home games. And now Bloom-Carroll takes the top spot in Buckeye and remains undefeated in conference play. The loss for Logan Elm evens them out with Hamilton Township and Taze Valley. Those 2 teams play Bloom-Carroll to finish out the season and will fight for a share of the title.
Man, it's going to be a wild ride to see what happens in the MSL Buckeye. Thanks for the great work, Maria. We've still got one more playoff bracket to break down featuring Logan Elm. Jack and Chloe, take us through Region 15.
Jacob, despite the loss, the Braves have already clinched a spot in the Region 15 playoffs. The 7-4-0 has seen 4 other teams clinch a spot, and there are currently 7 open spots.
Even after losing to West Muskingum, Morgan still has a 99% chance of making it, but they are expected to win out, so all they need to do is execute and root against Maysville. Vinton County is essentially in after beating River Valley, but the Vikings are at 99%. But if they lose the conference championship next week to NY, they only fall to 98%. They'll likely grab a spot in the 10 to 16 range. After losing to Lima Central Catholic tonight, Licking Valley falls to a 70% chance of making the playoffs. They need to beat either of the LCL Buckeye favorites, Granville or Licking Heights, to clinch a spot. Philo saw their chances of making the playoffs fall to 32% after falling to Tri-Valley. If they can win their final 2, they're up to 91%, and they need to root for West Muskingum to beat Conshohocken next week. Now, following a loss, Cambridge makes Warren's odds in playoffs. They sit at 60%. They can only get up to 67%, so they need to root for a Philo loss next week, plus an Alexander win in Week 10 to improve their strength of schedule. We saw Maysville lose to Sheridan, which drops their playoff chances to 34%, and winning out gets them to 84%. But one more loss puts them at just 2%.
And now, Chloe, that does it for our playoff bracket breakdown, but there aren't our only brackets. We've got another high-stakes tournament well underway on social media, the Fanbase Frenzy. Only 16 teams remain in the search for Southeast Ohio's best football culture, the best community, the best fan base.
And it only gets better from there. The voting continues on our Instagram at 6:30 p.m. on Monday for both sides of the bracket, so rally your team to the victory.
That's right, guys, but remember, you can also check out our social medias for game recaps and highlights. You'll want to follow along with us as these title races begin to wind down in the coming weeks. So stay tuned on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok for Southeastern Ohio football coverage. Yeah, guys, you definitely want to stay tuned with us on TikTok because we provide some great content.
Absolutely, Jacob.
I mean, no kidding about that. I mean, we've seen a couple of really successful videos so far.
For sure. Well, that wraps up our coverage on another great week of 740 football. For written content, check us out at woub.org/gridiron. And check out our 2 podcasts on SoundCloud at WOUB Digital for a bigger breakdown on the games we cover. And remember, there's nothing better than Friday nights and Gridiron Glory.